Part 5, the deadly left. As we've said in our previous parts, the left wing of this country is mostly responsible for the violence that this country has seen, whether they are assassins or mass murderers. They're advocating for violence, they're promoting violence, they're violent themselves. Um, the left wing has an amazing ability to sidestep guilt. Remember, Democrats and left wingers are never guilty of anything. They are incapable of understanding self responsibility. They don't even know what the term means. They're never guilty of anything. Or they'll just equivocate and say that we're no better or worse than another group. It's all the same, so why just blame us when you're not blaming them and all this other stuff. When they start into the equivocation, they really have their tail in a ringer because they're out of options. Now, there's a psychological term for for people who are incapable, let's say, of separating truth from fiction or their deeds and actions when they come in conflict with each other. It's called cognitive dissonance, psychological term, which basically means that you have inconsistent thoughts, beliefs, or attitudes, or the tension that's caused by having those inconsistencies. You can often hold two or more beliefs about a certain subject at the same time. Another way of describing cognitive dissonance is where your beliefs don't match your behavior. People who are often cited as having said, "Do as I say, but not as I do." Some of you may have parents who used to say things like that, or maybe you do, are probably guilty of having cognitive dissonance. Narcissists versus reality. The guy you're looking at in the mirror is, Mr. Perfect, but in reality, you're kind of a dork, whatever. Someone like that might be guilty or be suffering from cognitive dissonance. People who engage in moral relevancy or relativism, where any given scenario, you might say that this is morally okay for this person at this time under these circumstances, but not for that person under another time or under different circumstances. You keep moving the goalposts all over the place, create a bunch of gray area where the black and whites that cannot exist, that little happy zone that liberals like to live in, that allow them to move those goalposts around and not have to deal with hard truths. Something I wrote a lot about in my book. Moral relativism, definitely a sign of cognitive dissonance. People who cherry pick, they decide they're going to ignore inconvenient truths and only focus on things that make them feel good, things that coincide with their beliefs. People who lie to themselves all the time. People whose assumptions are often contradicted by new information, but they still believe in their assumptions and ignore the new information. No matter what it is, they have to cling to that belief despite evidence to the contrary. This is basically a liberal in a nutshell. Karl Marx was once famous. The left loved him. He was once famously quoted as saying, "Accuse others of what you do," which is often what the left does as part of this cognitive dissonance. They accuse Republicans of the very thing they are guilty of, again, to disrupt the blame coming their way. So Democrats, as I said, liberalism is a form of sanity, or you have to be nuts to believe half the things Democrats seem to believe in. Their circular logic, their hypocrisy. It's all part of the same mental problem, which coincides perfectly with cognitive dissonance. They just can't see the forest for the trees. They cut off their nose to spite their face. They talk out of both sides of their mouths. They want everything, both ends of the thing. They want everything at the same time. They want things both ways. All of this kind of stuff, over and over and over and over. It just gets old after a while. So they're all nuts. What else is new? And of course they're the ones inciting all this nonsense and guilty of most of this stuff, because they just don't see the consequences of their actions. Now, the final point I want to make about all this is maybe offer an obvious solution and another obvious reason. Aside from the cognitive dissonance that Democrats are in, which is part of the reasoning of escalation of violence as they become more and more nutty, more and more mentally unstable, and that is the status of mental health in this country, which is steadily getting worse. It is not a coincidence that back in the back in the 1980s, the laws regarding involuntary commitment got more strict, probably because of political correctness. Who knows? A series of other crazy ideas, some of which might have been from the right side of the political spectrum, but for whatever reason, they decided that it was not morally or legally or whatever cool to hold somebody who did not fall under three conditions, and only three conditions: involuntary or against their will for over a certain length of time, which would vary in different states and places. So you had to be either mentally ill, on needing substance abuse, or you are an abuser of some substance, or you have a developmental disability. Now, the first two, or the last two, make some sense, but the first one, the mental illness, had a specific guideline. That was, you had to be immediately dangerous to yourself or others. Immediately, in an imminent danger to yourself or others. That means like right now. Now, that might have some, gray area attached to it, meaning that it might be, right now might mean today, it might mean the next week, I don't know, but determined to be by some shrink or person in that capacity, immediate danger to oneself or others. And if you weren't, they couldn't hold you after a certain period of time. And when that law changed from what it was before, mental health in this country plummeted. Now why? Because people were no longer allowed, psychologists, psychiatrists, they're no longer allowed to determine that you might be a danger to yourself or others in the near future or sometime in the future. You could no longer hold someone for observation just to make sure that this person is okay. You had any doubts about it, too bad, you had to let them go. Out the door they went, you never saw them again. And then, of course, years later, they go on a killing spree, and you're like, the law. The other part of the thing, or other part of this law, or what the other effect of this law was that they didn't follow up with the strictness of the law with anything preventative. So there's no preventative care for mental illness, because preventative care would necessarily require involuntary commitment sometimes. You can't have that, therefore you can't have the preventative maintenance on the brain required to avoid it in the future. They don't do that very well with drug abuse either, by the way. You can't hold some. You don't have the ability to watch anybody, even like from a distance, who might be, capable of going postal. Someone who seems suspicious, or someone um, who is saying some goofy things on social media that might make you suspicious that they might be capable or planning something or what have you. None of this is allowed, really. They got a little bit better, but only like on the terror watch list side of things, but not on the mental health side of things. Now, here's another thing that's causing a lot of mental health, especially among men and boys in this country, which are completely ignored. It's all about the women, it's all about the girls. But boys are one category that literally falling off the radar, mental health wise. You got a society now in America that is so focused on political correctness, where men and masculinity is constantly beat up in the media, constantly made to be in derogatory terms with regard to political correctness. White people and with regard to white privilege and this hoax and this BS about white privilege being constantly pounded into the youth of America, or and of course being rich is another one. But if you're a white male boy from a rich family, you are probably so self-loathing, so self-hating if you are someone who is going to let themselves be, moved by the political correctness crowd in this country. Everything you see, everything you hear, everything you read, everything you're told, everything you're taught in school, you are the problem. What do you think that does to the brain? What do you think that does to these kids? And a lot of these nutburgers who went on killing sprees are white males. Why do you think that is? Now, historically, there are a lot of women serial killers. But modern times, they're all men. Why do you think that is, folks? We have a big problem in this country, and we're not addressing it. So to conclude, we have a number of things going on here. We have a rise in violence, or seeming rise in violence, coming from all areas. Most of it politically driven, mostly from the left against the right, or from left-wing protected victim groups against those not protected by the left. A combination of these things. Now the police are attacked. Now people in authority attack. Now people who are elected officials are being routinely attacked, not just assassinated or attempted assassination. Now it's like a routine thing. Now you got famous people getting on videos and saying, go after these people. You got celebrities at marches saying, I thought about, blowing up the White House. Oh yes, I think that's perfectly normal for me to say in front of, 100,000 women, rabid left-wing women. Why not? Who's going to stop me? What consequence am I ever going to have to face? Zero. So bolder and bolder they get, more and more dangerous they get. Overall, right-wingers, they're too busy with their jobs and their family to go picket, to go march. I'm not saying they don't, but on average, they're far less of advocates, far less agitators than the left is, and they've never really been anywhere close to the way the left is. The left is unhinged. They have become a psychiatrist's wet dream in terms of the issues and problems that they seem to have. They are, by every fair definition, slowly slipping into insanity if they're not already there. The things that they advocate, the hypocrisy, the cognitive dissonance, the circular logic, the talking out of two sides of their mouth, the BS that's constantly going on with the media helping protect lunatics at all costs, down to the last 11th hour, till they finally have to just stop and just walk away and ignore it and pretend they never said anything about it when they get their hands caught in the cookie jar with their lies or their hopeful prayers that they're right, that this time finally it's not a terrorist that's doing the attack, or that this time it's finally a white male European Republican behind these vicious killing spree, and it just never turns out that way. And there's a reason it never turns out that way. Because the right, we got our problems, folks. And conservatives may have quite a few as well. But we're not nuts. We're living in reality. And we see this. I see this. And I comment on it. And I invite you to comment on it. But beware, if you get snarky on me, I may ignore you, so you're wasting your time. And beware, this is also just, as I said, a exercise for me to get it out. It's an opinion. It's based on research, but I am not the guy who wrote the paper, published the article, so going after me is a waste of time. Go find those people and complain on their blogs and complain on their websites. Don't come at me. I'm just passing it along, validating my beliefs about how I feel over these last 30 so years of watching politics and watching current events, how I feel about and what I think about the escalation of violence in this case in our country. You do not want to have this conversation. Believe me, lefties. You will lose every time. You guys do not come out smelling good at all. Your history is dark. It is bleak. And your current history is every bit as bad. So, until then, till the next time, I appreciate your viewing and hope you tell your friends and neighbors. And we'll see you on the next one. Take care.